Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that literally affects almost all of us, a massive historical shift. For decades, the middle class was basically the undisputed backbone of the entire economy. But today, well, the data shows the American dream is costing nearly twice as much as it did a generation ago. Let's really unpack this whole then versus now reality. A stable job, a house, a family, a future. Think about that for a second. These weren't considered luxuries. They were just the standard traditional hallmarks of the American dream. The deal was, if you worked hard, this was the baseline you could expect. But today, the data is telling a very different story. Millions of Americans are looking at these exact four things and feeling like that guaranteed future is just vanishing right before their eyes. And here's the thing that research points out. Most people still don't understand what actually changed. It's not just this vague feeling of things being a little bit tougher at the grocery store. No, it's a massive structural shift. So what exactly happened here? How did we go from a historically guaranteed future to this current state of, widespread economic confusion? We need to break down the actual mechanics of this shift. To really see how this builds up, let's meet Michael. Michael works full-time, he pays his taxes, and he does everything society told him to do. He literally followed the rule book to the letter. He got the education, secured the reliable office job, sits in that awful commute traffic every day, buys his groceries, and pays his bills. But despite playing completely by the rules, every single year, life inexplicably gets harder for him. And here is the absolutely crucial paradigm shift we have to understand. Michael isn't failing. The system around him changed. Actually, let's zoom out for a second. We so often look at personal finance as just a pure reflection of our personal choices, right? But the economic data shifts our focus to a much larger macroeconomic reality. We're looking at a systemic evolution here, not some individual shortcoming. This right here is the absolute definition of the cost of living trap. On one hand, you have expenses just completely skyrocketing: housing, healthcare, education, food. Just to put that into perspective, when you look at the real numbers, housing costs have wildly outpaced wage growth. Homes are effectively 74% more expensive today when you adjust for inflation and historic earnings. And on the other hand, a totally flat, stagnant salary. Wages just simply haven't grown fast enough to catch up with the exploding cost of basic human needs. Because of that huge, widening gap, we're seeing an incredible behavioral shift. Think about it. Years ago, debt was mainly a temporary tool. You took out a loan, you paid it off, and you moved on with your life. But today, debt has practically become a lifestyle. The heavy, compounding burdens of credit cards, student loans, endless car payments, and just crushing mortgage stress, they've been completely normalized. It's almost become a required part of everyday life just to keep your head above water. Which brings us to a really powerful and honestly somewhat dark summary of the emotional toll. Millions of Americans are no longer building wealth. They're managing survival. The whole fundamental purpose of the middle class used to be wealth building, establishing some security, maybe passing on a better life to your kids. Now, for so many people, that goalpost has been aggressively moved to just managing survival month to month. So the crucial point we really have to wrap our heads around is summarized by a single, shocking number: 1. And this is exactly what that 1 represents. Today, the data shows that tons of middle-class families are living just one emergency away from total financial disaster. One unexpected hospital bill, one sudden layoff, one crisis. That is the extreme fragility of modern American families right now. The financial buffer that used to literally define middle-class stability, it's just completely evaporated. I mean, ask yourself, how many people do you know who are in this exact position today? Probably quite a few. And it's not just the math. The psychology has fundamentally changed too, because while people are struggling in reality, modern America has become this fierce competition of appearances. People are constantly comparing their everyday, heavily squeezed lives to, Instagram luxury, expensive vacations, and influencer culture online. It's actually kind of ironic. We are simultaneously more financially stretched than we've been in decades, yet vastly more visually glamorous. This cultural shift severely exacerbates the financial stress, driving people to try and project wealth even when they absolutely cannot afford it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the actual structure of the economy was transforming. We basically transitioned from a system focused on providing basic needs to one heavily driven by corporate investments. Large corporations consolidated power. Things like housing shifted from being viewed primarily as shelter to being treated as a major investment vehicle for Wall Street. Healthcare transformed into a massive profit-driven business. Everyday necessities were essentially corporatized. And, well, everyday life simply became way more expensive as a result. Let's look at how this compounding pressure actually feels on the ground. It looks like higher rent, higher insurance, higher food prices, higher debt, higher stress. This rising action is the inescapable daily drumbeat for the modern working class. It just compounds every single month. And the exact same paycheck. That right there is the reason why full-time workers feel utterly exhausted. It's the punchline to a very grim reality. They are doing everything right, but they're basically running on an economic treadmill that just keeps speeding up while their financial resources stay exactly the same. And that brings us right back to the core thesis of this whole explainer. The middle class didn't disappear overnight. It slowly got squeezed. You see, it wasn't a single catastrophic event or a sudden market crash. No, it was a slow, systemic, gradual shift over decades that slowly tightened the vice on everyday workers until the pressure just became undeniable. So how are people actually surviving all of this? Well, we're seeing 4 major adaptations right now. Number 1, leaving expensive cities in search of a lower cost of living. Number 2, building side income because, let's face it, one traditional full-time job often just isn't enough anymore. 3, drastically living below their means. And 4, learning acute financial skills just to navigate the modern economy. People aren't just sitting still, they are actively having to restructure their entire lives just to survive the squeeze. The American dream used to feel guaranteed. It was a societal promise. Today, for so many people across the country, that historical certainty has been totally replaced by a fundamentally unpredictable and highly stressful reality. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider after looking at all this data. Do you think the American middle class is disappearing? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. We really rely on these discussions to understand how these massive systemic shifts are impacting real lives. And make sure to subscribe for more explainers on money, the economy, and the changing reality of modern America. I'll catch you in the next one.